Hello and welcome to Shaman Sister Sessions, episode 96. I'm Michelle Hawk and I'm here with my shaman sister, Katherine Bird. And thank you for joining us. It's kind of crazy to believe that we're almost at 100 episodes. It's been a few years in the making, and we're really happy that this work is continuing to support you. So thanks for joining us. And at the end of our conversation today, at the end of this episode, we'll have one or two ways that you can support us if you feel so called, because we do want to keep offering this work out in the world for free. And there are some behind the scenes costs that go into making these episodes. So stay tuned to the end for one or two ideas as to how you can continue to support us and help us make more amazing content for you. And as we're launching in, today we're talking about embodiment. And this is a passion topic of both mine and Katherine's. And we definitely have a lot of tools and a lot of practices to go into and sharing some stories with you today as well. So embodiment, here we go. Kat, how are you doing?
I'm okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm okay. I'm just like, I'm okay today. Today is just okay. And that's okay.
Yep, exactly. I feel maybe I've got enough energy for both of us today. I went to hot yoga this morning, and so I feel all super activated, and I already sweated super hard. So I'm ready to go.
Okay, great.
Regardless of where we're at in our energy, right? There's and knowing that embodiment, just to kind of first off, and this is a perfect little segue into one of the my things that I keep telling people about embodiment is embodiment doesn't equal exercise. Like embodiment doesn't actually equal the level of activity and enthusiasm that you have in your body and in your energy right now. So Kat and I can both be very embodied in different ways, and that's perfect.
Yeah, it's being able to be really in tune with whatever is present and what the body is signaling and what it is communicating, and being able to feedback with that in order to get the results or the, whatever it is that you're looking to have more of or less of in your life. It's really helpful to be in that communication space between the body and what it's needing and wanting and where it's at in any particular moment. Not necessarily, like you're saying, exercise, which might be, oh, my body actually wants this, but I'm going to override it because I think I should do that. It's actually being in tune with what's real.
Mm-hmm. And we're done. That was it. Because Kat so perfectly. That was, and I want to draw some attention to different components of that. Number one, if we're defining embodiment, if we can give sort of your bullet point version of what is embodiment, it is, and I play with this a little bit. So Kat, come in if there's other things you want to add to this definition, but I work with it as having your higher self and all of your energy bodies firmly anchored into the physical plane and the cellular structure. So it's this, not only which then enables the listening and the response and the feedbacking and the communication that Kat was talking about. But first and foremost, most people in the world are not actually embodied. And we go through in our lives, we go through different phases of how embodied we are, or maybe we pop out of our bodies due to trauma or spacing out or whatever the deal is, but it's essentially how much can we anchor and land in the etheric bodies to have a tangible touch point within the physical realm.
Mm-hmm. And we often in our spiritual communities or different kinds of practices or focuses, we tend to discount or deny or shame or not actually want the embodied part. We don't actually want that for ourselves. So it's something that we have to actually desire and have a focus toward and work with, because so often in spiritual works or mystical works, it's not seen as the most valuable component of the work. But we're here being humans, and that means we have a body, and it is a super valuable part of the work, and it is communicating, and it is a part of the experience that you're having, and isn't the part that you're trying to be free of. There's a lot of teachings that are around basically denying the body and releasing attachment to the body, and letting go of that connection in order to transcend into something that is given as a higher value. And that's not always the healthiest approach to spiritual or mystical works, and can lead to a lot of issues. So it's something that Michelle and I, as practitioners, working with a lot of practitioners and people who are doing mystical and spiritual practices and so on, have seen the repercussions, I think, both within ourselves and then within others, of when we're not really actually embodied. And there's lots of reasons why we don't want to be embodied. So we're going to talk about that as well today.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kat, you're speaking to one of the, there are many, many layers to this as well. Why might people not be embodied? And I want to go back to one of the very first things you said there was around the desire to be embodied, right? In order for us to actually make that connection point, in order for our etheric bodies, for our light bodies to actually have a place to live and to land within the cellular structure, there has to be the desire for that to happen, which means that we have to understand, it's not a should, I should be in my body, or just like I should work out, right? It's not a, something that we're placing really low on the scale of value. But when we understand how vitally important it is, and I hope by the end of our time together today, you will view it as just as vital as we do, because it is really, really important. And when we understand what that actually gives us and what that makes possible, I'm willing to bet it's going to rank kind of number one or up way higher on your personal awareness. So desire to be embodied, and of course different practices and things to practice embodiment. Anything else we want to say about what, let's touch back on, sort of those other pieces of what is embodiment, right? So Kat, in your very first thing you mentioned, we talked about the landing the energy in the body. You talked about the communication and the feedback. Let's kind of pull out some of those other pieces of, well, what is embodiment? What does that mean?
So,
Greg?
I'm sorry, my brain is not functioning the best today, so I'm not sure what your question is. Are you saying beyond those two things or inside of those two things?
Let's elaborate. So if we're really looking at, well, so that, and again, it's so funny. I do have to say, it's really funny talking about embodiment, because inherently this is a concept that exists beyond the cognitive mind. So I want to call attention to the fact that we're here, we're having a conversation, and you're here watching or listening to this podcast episode and kind of running it through your cognition. That is inherently not necessarily an embodied way of receiving this information. So Kat, maybe it's perfectly appropriate that the brain isn't really catching up to this, because ideally we'd all be, doing movement practice and doing more of a transmission felt sense experience here. And we want to give your brain something to think about so that it can have some access point to this. So with that, people, I do invite you to receive this as transmission. And even while you're listening, maybe you're listening while you're driving, or maybe you're watching this, or you're in study, the entire time we're talking, I do invite you to bring how much can you land this information and track where this information is going within your physical structure. How can you start to turn up the volume on the relationship between the cognition and how it's anchoring into the body? So and that's your first practice right there, the very first thing we're giving you to play with.
Right. Um, so what was the question again? We're elaborating on what is embodiment. Is that the deal? Besides feedbacking and communication and being in your cellular structure.
Yeah, elaborating anything else we want to share, because we're shifting from here. We're going to talk about, well, why aren't we embodied, or why are people not embodied? What are the challenges to that, and then how do we do it? So is there anything else that we want people to have going into working with it a little more proactively?
Well, as we look at embodiment and what it means to each one of us something just a little bit differently, because we're able to be in, like I said, that communication with ourselves, and being able to understand how we are interacting with the world, because it's so often we're seeing everything outside of us and feedbacking off of what is outside of us instead of feedbacking off of what is inside of us. And we're maybe coming from a place of making decisions, or having our energy move in a particular direction based on what's going on with someone else, or what we're experiencing in our community or our family, or something else like that, instead of what's actually true for us. And so the process of embodiment, being in the body, gives us access points to those like true knowing feelings around who we are, why we do what we do, and what our decisions are on a regular daily basis, and why we're making those decisions.
Mm-hmm. Love that. Okay. And as we're looking at, well, what then becomes possible when we have that feedback, when we have that inner awareness and making decisions and exhibiting behaviors based on that internal reality, rather than necessarily the external reality, or the healthy combination of those factors, right? Because then that is essentially how we interface in a healthy way with the world, right? It's like looking at, okay, within the body reality, within this, the realm of self, then what is the way that is responding in a proactive and harmonious way with these external factors? And really that's, it sounds really simple. Like I say that, and this is a thought that I've had for myself of looking at this, and it sounds like the most basic thing. And in a way it is. Like, this is human 101 here, or this is Earth 101, like how to live on Earth, how to live in a body, and how to work with that body, not necessarily as, there's a lot of, again, looking at the mystery schools and spiritual trainings that teach about the separation from the body and detachment from the body, but instead knowing that we are spiritual beings here to have an earthly experience. So instead, how do we master the body, and how do we move the body, and how do we play with the body and have experiences with the body, knowing that is why we're here on Earth.
Right. And when we're embodied, we get to experience more pleasure. We get to experience more sense, more sensation, more ability to track our sensation, and more ability to speak to our desires for our physical body. And we get to engage in activities that actually feel good, and stand for those things, like to stand for a life of actually enjoying and being in pleasure inside of our body, and finding that pathway towards pleasure for ourselves, towards being in a sensuous experience, which is being connected to all of the senses and experiencing them fully. And when we're not embodied, we generally will have a harder time tracking what actually feels really good for us, and then claiming that and making a stand for what it is that we want more of in our life when it comes to physical sensation or sensory sensations, or pleasure, or even food, eating or having an experience, or where you live. These can all feel really disconnected if we're not actively working inside of the physical body.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I want to come alongside that and say, Also, being able to track our health is really, it's a function of embodiment, right? Because think for a moment about, if you do have this cultivated awareness and feedbacking, then not only are you able to bring about more experiences that feel pleasurable and have healthy sensation, and of course the ripple effect of this moves well beyond the physical body, right? But if we're able to have the awareness of, oh, it feels good to me, like I have the felt sense of, it feels good to have this person in my life, right? It impacts our relationships, it impacts our ability to receive money, it impacts our careers, it impacts where we travel, it impacts everything, right? And health is one of these really foundational principles where the more attuned we are to how the body is in its most elevated state, in its healthiest, most enlivened state, then we're able that much more easily to tell if something is off, right? And so whether adjusting, that comes into balance through adjusting nutrition or adjusting sleep or receiving some body work or adding a supplement or taking out a supplement. And it's the more fine-tuned that awareness is, the more easily and gracefully we can take agency for our own healthful lived experience. And again, this ripples beyond the physical body. This ripples into every single area of life. That if you don't have this awareness with your body, with it will always tell you the truth. This is the other thing I tell my clients all the time is your body will always tell you the truth. And, we can get into, questioning on these different layers of self. But if you want to know guaranteed in any moment how your personal energy is responding to any given influence, don't ask the mind, don't ask the heart, don't ask the higher self, ask the body, because it is your most accurate, most grounded representative of that information.
Mm-hmm. And also when we're embodied, we get a greater proficiency and ability in the mystical works, the spiritual works, healing, all of these things. Like if you're interested in that, if you're here. So it seems counterintuitive and people think that isn't the way that it works. But the further up you want to go, the further down you want to go. And so the further out you want to go, the further in you want to go. And that makes it a safer, more grounded, more experience. So that if you're having spiritual experiences and you're able to also be embodied, come back to your body, you're at less risk of sort of spiritual mishaps and energetic deviations that cause trouble inside of the physical body. And you're more able to be clear channel, like you're able to not only bring in information, but to process it in a way that is going to have some sort of positive influence and effect on real life. It's not just a lot of mystical, spiritual kind of mumbo, weirdo, whatever, like just all over the place sort of information and things and pretty pictures and stuff where you kind of get lost in the spiritual stuff. It's a place that we get lost. And coming from this space of being deep in Taoist study, it's a very, very mystical tradition and lineage. And there's a lot of connecting to divine and to guides and to energies and to all of these things. But it is always coming back to attention on the physical body and attention on how the energy is being incorporated into the physical body. And how is that energy that you're working with or you're cultivating or you're experiencing, how are you using that to become a better person, to to be a beneficial presence on the planet, to have a greater positive influence on others and the world, not just, oh, I like to meditate and go into this super blissed out state and that's what I do, but I'm not translating it into anything real in the world. I'm not translating it into service of any kind. I'm not translating it into being a better human being and being kinder and more loving and helpful to the world. And being embodied helps us to be able to take whatever kind of spiritual information that we're getting and bring it into the body, into our physical body, into our organs, into the system, into the cells, transform ourself, not just see a pretty picture or slideshow of beautiful colors and whatever images we're getting, but actually incorporate it into our being so that we're changing ourselves and then becoming a better person through the process.
Mm-hmm. I like that idea. And I want to kind of fill people in on this image then that I'm having is the body is then the link and the connection point between the connecting with spirit in the etheric realm and then the ability to translate that into earth plane. So think about like anything that you want to enact in your life in order to, and people do this in all sorts of different forms, like setting intentions or praying or making a vision board or whatever it is, like that there's some sort of spiritual invitation going out, that the answer to that prayer or that invitation has to flow through your body in order to actualize on the physical plane. In order to see a change in your life, whatever pulse of energy you're receiving is going to move through your body before it manifests in your life. So the clearer you can be in your body, the more present you can be in communication with that, the more you can receive and allow yourself, like have a really big container. This is another important piece of the more embodied you are, the more space you have to receive energy in your body. And if you're not very embodied, then your container and your channel is much lower capacity. And so when we're not embodied, in addition to, kind of getting spun out and potentially having these very traumatic energetic experiences, that can also translate just in the human realm to, we feel more overwhelmed. We have difficulty making decisions. We're looking for approval from other people. We don't trust ourselves. We aren't satisfied and uplifted in our work in the world. We have difficulty relating to other people, or we have trouble having really powerful conversations. We don't know what our truth is, right? There's all sorts of ramifications to not being fully embodied, because it essentially means we can't hold as much energy in ourselves, and we're much less effective at interfacing with the world. So if you want to, again, be a more effective human, have an easier time connecting with very high vibration energy and translate those high vibration energies into your 3D lived experience, it's the natural tendency is to want to cultivate out here or up here. And I see this in, a lot of people talking about, oh, well, I want to, looking to our entrepreneurs in the room, like I want to get better at, I want to make more money. So I'm working on XYZ in my business, and I want to expand my spiritual awareness. So I'm working up here on my third eye stuff, but they're not actually in their bodies and they don't really have an anchored sense of truth. Neither of these cultivation practices are going to be effective, because there's no link point and there's no translation point for that energy to move.
And I find it really fascinating that oftentimes the people who are most interested in becoming more psychic, like if you ask them what they're looking for and they're like, I want to be more psychic, like most of the time they're the people who actually don't need to be focusing in that direction. They're the people who actually need to be focusing on being in their body and understanding their physical body and healing their physical body, or healing their emotional wounds and these things. But it's sort of like when, I don't know if you've ever had a kind of like an allergy test, or you go and get tested for foods that you shouldn't be eating. And oftentimes they're the exact foods that you're craving the most. And so when you get that list, you're like, oh my God, I eat that every day. And yeah, you're eating that every day. You're coming up as allergic to it because it's just overwhelming your system. What you need to do is move over here and get this other stuff. And so I see that a lot. Do you see that a lot, Michelle, of people who are requesting, like, I want to be more psychic, or I want to be...
Yeah, I would say that's a very common thing. And again, pretty much without fail, the people who are talking about, and this can come in all sorts of different forms. So I'll let you, as you're listening, self-assess. Is this you that you say, or that you wanted to cultivate your intuition, that you want to connect with your spirit guides, that you want to practice a particular form of telepathy or something, that you want to cultivate your psychic visioning, that you want to cultivate any of the clairs, right? So if this is you, that your focus is, I will say, upper chakra, usually like third eye crown. If your focus is up here, really, quite honestly, ask yourself, how is your relationship to your lower chakras? And I get it because I've been there. Like, that used to be me, quite honestly. And I would say that I didn't fully actually land in my body in the way that I know now what is possible until my early 20s. And I spent my entire life up to that point being very psychically activated. I was a very magical kiddo, and actively cultivating my upper energy centers more than my lower energy centers, even though I was also studying and practicing shamanism from the time I was 15, which did have, I think that's part of the reason I didn't float away, is I did have some of these more earthy anchors to help me get into some grounding practices, but it wasn't my favorite. I wasn't really interested in cultivating anything lower chakra based. And it was only in my early 20s when I started actually plugging into my body and plugging into earth that I realized how unhealthy I had been for my whole life up to that, where I realized, oh, I'm not actually shy. I'm not actually lacking confidence. It's just I hadn't landed here yet. So no wonder I didn't feel super comfortable being bold and being out in the world and speaking my truth and interfacing with people, because I wasn't actually here. And I remember telling my mom when I was about 12 or 13, actually like coming to her in tears and saying, it's hard being human. It's hard being on earth. So I get it. Suffice it to say, I totally get it. And I can guarantee you that the best way to be more effective in the upper realms and to elevate your psychic practice and to have the capacity to work with higher vibration guides is not to cultivate this, but instead to cultivate your lower energy centers and your body awareness, your sensitive, cultivated, earthly based practice.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of people are afraid of that. A lot of people are afraid that if they focus on the body and they focus on physicality, if they focus on working in their lower centers, that they're somehow going to lose their spiritual connection. That's something that comes in, like, oh, I don't want to do that because then I'm going to lose this. And that's just not the case. That's not how this works. And and it's not how it works. It might change because it actually becomes more embodied. It becomes more kinesthetic, meaning that the body is working with psychic information in a way that you can listen to it more fully, and you can hear it in a different way, and you can track it in a different way. And, you know, I know that if I can get information, but the most valuable information that I get, as far as, especially for real world stuff, if I'm making a decision, if I'm going someplace, or if I'm making a decision about hanging out with somebody, whether I follow my own best advice or not, it is always from my body. My body is like, hey, this is the right thing to do, or hey, don't do that thing. And then I have the ability to either listen or not listen inside of that. But there's not a terrible amount of confusion. And my mind can get really busy with, is this the right decision, or am I doing the right thing, or why is this make sense, or what's all the logical conclusions, and what's the pros and cons, and all of these things. But if I really just listen to my body and what my body signals are, and get to that proficiency level where you can feel something and recognize it consistently as a signal that means something. It's either a yes or it's a no, or it's a go this way or go that way. If you can get really good at that, then you can actually tell your mind to stop worrying so much and stop stressing out over your decisions. And in that, you do become more connected to your intuition and your guides and everything else, because the mind isn't trying to force everything, and the mind isn't trying to control everything. Because when the body doesn't have, if there's not a sense of a rudder from the body that it is signaling directions to go, then the mind feels like it needs to take over that position. It needs to take over that job. And this is just something that happens. And we've been taught to make all of our decisions with our mind. We weren't taught in school to listen to our body. I can bet that very few of us had the experience of being in a classroom and a teacher ever saying, "What does your body say about that?" Or "Let's take some breaths and feel what our bodies have to say about this issue." No, it's like, what do you think about that? What do you think about this situation? What do you think about what I'm saying here, and analyze it with me and figure it out with me, not let's feel what this means.
And I think there's a really important piece that I want to elaborate a little bit on what you're saying in terms of how we relate to guidance and different levels of receiving guidance, right? And so in terms of trying to problem solve or trying to gain information, so far we've talked primarily about the mind and the body, and yet we also have our spiritual intelligence, so maybe working with receiving information from guides, and we also have the heart intelligence. And I think it's really important to first emphasize, you're not going to get necessarily, you might get the same information from multiple fields of asking, but it might be totally different, and there's a really good reason for that. So, and I've had this experience too, and I want to share with you. Again, remember, I told you the body always tells you the truth, always. And it doesn't mean that these other parts are necessarily not telling the truth. It's just, again, they're relating to a different aspect of self. So imagine, Kat, what's an example of a question or an inquiry that you've brought and kind of had this experience of like multiple layers of different things? Like, what's an example of an inquiry we can use here?
Well, I mean, for me in the last year, it's been a lot about moving around and going to different places, or where I'm gonna live, or something like that. So yeah, I would just say that that's a big one. Like, it's like a big life decision of like, where am I supposed to be right now?
Okay, great. So maybe let's kind of play with the decision that you made to move to New Mexico, right, as being one of these big questions. And, looking at the mental experience, I think it's fair to say it was a big mindfuck, right? The whole, what am I thinking? I've heard her say that so many times. What am I thinking? Well, again, if we're asking the mind, there's going to be all this conflicting information and doubts, and this doesn't make any sense why I'm doing this. And asking the body, asking the higher self, and asking the heart, where did you land on each of these? Like, where was the information coming from, and how did it inform your decision?
Well, I would say, yeah, it definitely wasn't coming from my mind, because my mind was very confused and like wanting things to be different, I think, in a lot of ways, to have an easier choice. And I know that also there was the space of, even my heart was like, well, decisions that I'm making are going to mean that I'm going to lose something, or things are going to change, or it would be more heart soft in a certain space, like to stay where maybe I'm more comfortable, or where I know more people, or I have love already, than to be like, oh, let me go to a brand new place where I'm not going to have love. I'm not going to have that emotional connection to other people. that I would have if I had made a decision to stay in Portland or be back in Southern California or so on. Like, I had a lot of community and a lot of love in those spaces. So those two, but then whenever there was the question of tuning into more spiritual intelligence and higher intelligence, it was like, well, this is what, do this. And then that needed to sort of filter down, and then I needed to sit with my body, and I could feel my body felt as though it was moving in a direction, and I kept making physical, real world decisions as though I was moving in a direction. And so there was sort of like a stream of energy that my physical body was orienting toward. And so being able to track that, even with all the confusion and the little bit of heartbreak and the like, oh my God, what am I thinking? Being able to tune into those two specific fields gave me at least enough solace in a way to make a really big decision that in a lot of ways made no sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's great.
And you love it, and you found the perfect place to be. And, you know, again, I've heard now on the other side of this is exactly what needed to happen. Right. And because you were able to have that current that you were relating to, again, feeling, okay, my body is making decisions and making movements in this direction, which is aligning with the spiritual guidance that I'm receiving, which is not congruent with my head space or my heart space, but we know that these are the parts that are most easily confused and influenced by these external factors, right? Looking at where are each of these pieces getting their information from? Well, your physical body is oriented toward life path and toward earth wisdom, right? And so we hold within the physical body, within the structures, we have all the codes of earth. So it's very, very truthful and ancient, and we're talking to Gaia here through the body. And on the spiritual level, okay, we're attuning to the higher self wisdom. Well, the heart and the mind are all about how are we interfacing with the world around us, and so they are the most easily confused.
Right.
So,
and they're also really tracking a lot of relationship to the past. So relationship to past trauma or pain or who I was in the past, and not necessarily tuning as much towards who am I in the future. It takes conscious effort to shift that dynamic. Automatically, it's often orienting towards the past instead of present future. And the body's in the present, really. The body is like, right now, this is the thing. Right now, this is what's important. Right now, this is what I need. I need to go to sleep. I need to eat. I need to go to the bathroom. Like, the body is very, very, very present if we let it be. And our spiritual self is, very connected to when we think about our higher self, our future self, our most expansive, evolved, creative space that we could be in. And when we can really link those two together, then we're going to get some magic going on. But if we're, we can't leave out the body. We can't leave out the present moment, because we're looking to integrate those two. We're looking to integrate how are we bringing everything together to now, so that now becomes the most amazing thing that it can be.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And from the now, and from the body, that's where our power lives. That's where all of our agency and all of our ability to create change and our ability to respond and to create comes from the now. We can't create in the future. We can't create in the past. We create in this present moment. And again, the body is the part that lives in and inhabits in the present moment. So I'm really hoping here that as you're listening, you're on board and you're saying, okay. And I think maybe let's touch a little bit on why are people not embodied and what are some of the challenges around embodiment, and then give some tools and practices.
Okay.
Sound good?
Yeah. I mean, we've touched on them a little bit. Number one, childhood stuff. So that can be everything from trauma from being abused, neglected, shamed, having physical trauma, insignificant illness and injury, things that sort of scoop you out of your body. So you don't want to live there because it's not a safe or pleasant place to be. And then also systematic daily training to be out of the body. So don't feel those things. Don't be so sensitive. Don't have touch in your life as a child because we don't do that in school. Don't physically move your body when you're trying to learn something, which is how we actually learn things, is through play. We, like every other animal, we learn through play. And yet we're taught that the way we're supposed to learn is like sitting in a little desk and being very still with just a pencil. So we're taught consistently not to be in the body from our childhood, and that's something that we have to re-educate ourselves about and to feel into. So it's really helpful to do some journaling and some writing about, like, what was your childhood like? What were you taught about your body? How did you feel about your body? How was it to move inside your body? Did you feel safe? Did your physical environment feel safe for you? Did you feel safe expressing with your body? All of those things, did you love your body? And to come from that place to really learn, like, where did you get your information and how are you letting that information from when you were little inform how you're relating right now?
Mm-hmm. Hugely important. And I want to take it back even a step further to look at the process of arriving on Earth, right? And knowing that even as we're born into this body, our energy may not yet be fully anchored. So even if we did have a safe and nurturing childhood, even if we had all of the healthy support, if our energy bodies hadn't yet fully landed, then we're still not going to be embodied. So looking at, as you're doing your practice, as you're doing any soul level review, looking at, okay, do I have any soul contracts or do I have any patterns or agreements before I even came into my body about me not necessarily landing, or maybe we're carrying past life trauma that impacts our ability to fully inhabit an earth body. Last time I was on Earth, it wasn't safe because I had this experience. So the soul doesn't really actually want to land. Looking at, okay, are there any other contracts or agreements that I'm running that are preventing me from being fully anchored in the body? So resolving those, in addition to looking at conditioning and earthly experience once we're here, it's important to look at, again, is there anything in the way on that level as well?
And just a note there, we have had some episodes on soul contracts and past lives. So I don't know if those are the exact titles of the episodes, but go back and we get into that a little bit more. If you're like, wait, but how do I do that? Just go back and look through the episode list.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And I also, I've got a class recording in Lightworker Portal. So if you're not a member of Lightworker Portal yet, you can join that. It's the online community I created for you. And there's a bunch of different class recordings, one of which is specifically on soul contracts and agreements and goes through a process of working within the soul contracts. So it's either in our episodes or in there or both. In addition to the childhood experiences and conditioning, again, we can have, even if we are embodied and then we have these experiences come up that sort of pop us out of the body, there are things that happen in our lives that kind of make us waver through this experience, right? And ideally, we have enough awareness and we have enough practices in place that we can tell when that happens. It can be a little tricky where it's almost like the more embodied we are, the more easily we can fine-tune that awareness. But the less embodied we are, then the harder it can be for us to even tell that we're not fully in the body. So I hope that makes sense.
We can sometimes fool ourselves into thinking that we are, and we're really not. Sometimes even if we're like, well, I'm really active and I do these physical activities, but I used to work with a lot of athletes who would seem like they are the most embodied people ever. And then but you realize at a certain point that they've spent so much of their life overriding the signals of their body and their pain signals and their discomfort signals, that they've actually aren't living completely in the body, because it's been easier to sort of navigate it from almost like a mechanical point of view of my body. I make my body do these things instead of I'm in collaboration with my body doing some things. And so just kind of feel into that. And then also there are certain people who have certain who, we all have kind of the things, our little codes that we come in with, and are a little less in the physical body, right? That there are some people, you meet them, and who, what they come in, how their little packet of information that they're born into, they just are so embodied and they feel like they're in their body. And a lot of times when you're around them, you're like, oh, okay, that feels like, sort of like they're home, and that feels good to me. And then there are other people who just sort of have a little bit more of a wispiness to their system and have to work a little bit harder at this. And it's just part of the deal. And that's okay. It just means like, hey, I came in with this really important life lesson, and now I get to work with this, and I get to do this level of mastery. And often our level of mastery isn't necessarily the thing that we're really great at. It's the thing that we're actually challenged by. And then we have to master it because it's messing us up. So you might be that person too.
Mm-hmm. In which case, yeah, again, I love, Kat, that you're talking about there are people who might look as though they're the most embodied people because they do a lot in their bodies, but that does not necessarily correlate to actually being fully landed in the body. And I can again say that this was me. I did a lot of sports as a kid. I was, I all sorts of different things. I played basketball and softball and volleyball and tennis and horseback riding and crew and whatever other darn thing I was doing. And yet I wasn't healthy. I wasn't grounded. I didn't have this really consistent feeling of self-trust and self-knowledge, which then of course impacted all these other areas. And if you're looking for, okay, where, yes, there is some intersection between exercise and embodiment. And I'm a huge fan of, if we're looking at the Venn diagram of exercise and embodiment, right? Like maybe your physical practice, your movement practice that actually supports your more enhanced embodiment is something like Qigong, right? Or maybe something that is in this intersection of how can you do something with your body, no matter what it is. Or maybe you have that experience when you're strength training or when you're running, or this is one that I have when I'm paddleboarding, right? Where it's very fine-tuned balance and working with the elements and being outside, and there's a very heightened awareness that comes with that particular activity, which is also exercise, but it's really an embodiment practice because it helps me be more fully in my body and the expression of how aliveness wants to move through my physical being. In fact, that's a great question there. And maybe this is a little practice prompt for you, is to ask yourself, how does my aliveness want to move through my physical body? And see what happens.
Yay, that's great. Can we talk about like tools and stuff? Are we ready for that?
Yeah, tools and practices. What are some favorites? What are recommendations that we've got? We have a lot. I'll start with that one again. It's essentially, and again, with embodiment, there's sort of movement things, and there's also things that have nothing to do with actually moving the body, right? And so keep in mind that we're looking at both of these. It might be, and as you're building this, maybe you already have some degree of comfort with this, maybe you're already really embodied, but looking at what is the easiest path for you to strengthen that connection. And I actually think that there's that movement practice, if you're new to being fully embodied, if this is a new muscle for you, to pun intended, to strengthen, doing this within the context of a movement practice is going to be easier to feedback than doing a non-movement embody practice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really important, especially if you're engaging in spiritual work. If you're doing a lot of meditation, to have some sort of spiritual practice. I mean, spiritual practice, say it is a spiritual practice, but physical practice that you're engaging with, and something where you're moving your body, you're connected to your breath, you're connected to what's happening in your body, you're tracking, and you're paying attention. And that is going to expand your consciousness. You might think that it's something else, but really that will expand your consciousness exponentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What are some favorite movement practices and physical practices that you'd like to recommend for people to get them going in this direction?
Things that you can connect your physical body with your breath. So Qigong and yoga and, but any kind of physical practice where you can take anything and with attention and presence and consciousness, you can transform it to a very embodied experience where you're tracking, you're paying attention, you're feeling as much as possible. And that can just be going outside and taking a walk and being in nature. If you're really paying, like you can either be on your headphones and talking to your friend and whatever, like completely up here thinking about your lists and all of your things, and you can be doing the exact same activity as someone else, and the person who's really feeling the earth, feeling their feet, feeling the breath, feeling the space underneath their feet, tracking air on your face as it's moving past you, all of the little sensations that are there, that is a much more embodied experience. And you're going to get the benefit of that is actually exponential doing a shorter practice than doing a longer physical practice where you're not as present. And just call attention to if you go to the gym or if you've been to the gym and you have the people who are like, they're reading People magazine and they have their headphones and they're watching TV and they're on their phone and they're doing all of these other things and they're just like, and they're doing their thing, compared to the person who's really just being very present and they're focusing on one muscle group and they're breathing to it and they're watching it and they're going slow and they're being intentional in their experience. That person is probably going to build muscle and get stronger and be more effective in what they're trying to do than the person who's just like, well, I'm just here getting my steps in and my physical body isn't actually connected to anything that's going on in my head. And it's been very proven that if you want to build muscle, if you want to change your athletic ability, that bringing your consciousness and your visioning and your focus on muscle and so on is so much more effective. And even now they're aware that even if you're paralyzed, even if you're not able to move for some reason, you've been in a horrible wreck, if someone is doing exercises in their mind and they're feeling as though inside their body they're trying to track as though that was happening with them or with their muscles will actually change. So it's that communication and the collaboration between the mind and the body and the consciousness and paying attention, which will help you move. So I think like even things like when I was there in Portland, Michelle and I, we were doing a lot of just squats and push-ups and then doing Qigong, because there's something about building muscle and doing explosive movement that helps the embodiment of, like anchor that stuff in and then feel the energy that's moving because there's been so much physical movement. So there's so many options that you have, like what lights you up, what makes you feel good, what do you find interesting, and do that, and then do it with ask yourself, how much more attention can I bring to this? How much more consciousness can I bring to this? How much more can I feel this? How much more can I experience this with all of my senses?
Mm-hmm. Love that. Yeah. The, it's kind of like the difference between treating the body as a machine versus treating the body as a co-creator in the experience, right? And the, you know, again, with the treating it like a machine, it's like, oh, I know I should work out, quote, and this type of exercise, I'm going to, you know, just run on the treadmill and read a magazine. Like you said, it's becoming disengaged, and it's letting the body do something physical merely for the sake of doing something physical because we know we should in order to keep the machine in order, versus I live in my body, which has its own intelligence, its own wisdom, its own way of being in the world. How can every single thing that I'm doing, and again, this is where it translates to beyond movement practice. It's easiest, I think, to do it within the realm of movement practice. But then asking the question and practicing, how can every single thing that I'm doing throughout my life, meaning talking with people or working or eating or sleeping or taking a shower, whatever it is, be done in a way that I am fully inhabiting my body? And how much sensory experience, how much feedbacking experience within my body can I have as I am moving out through the world and doing things and eating things? And that's, again, sort of, it's easier to do within the context of a movement practice, since we are on purpose engaging the body in an active and intentional way, and then translating that beyond the movement practice into the rest of the day, the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. And then to just ask your body. If you have a question, ask your body. If something is going on, ask your body, hey, what do you think about this? What's going on, body? How do you feel? What are you sensing? And give yourself some space to track that. Be quiet, be still for a moment and feel and notice. And notice when you're in different situations, what does your body feel like? Notice what just be more aware of the noticing that you're having. And that will help you track that sense of truth inside.
Beautiful. Well, we gave you a lot to play with there. I think that feels pretty good. And Kat, unless there's anything else you want to make sure that we share before we close. No,
I think that's a lot. And we will have our next episode. We're going to be talking about rewilding and what that means. And sort of, we're seeing a bit of that in some different communities and things. And so we're going to talk about what that means and what does it mean to be a human at that level? And what for, I think, is an important question is like, okay, well, you didn't come here as a spirit fully only. You came here and you dumped yourself inside this human body. So what are you going to do about that? And we have such a short period of time inside this body. The body that you're in right now, you will only have a really short period of time in it. And so how can you make that more interesting, more delicious, more playful, more collaborative, all of those things, instead of fighting with it so much, instead of being at war with the body and hating the body and wishing that we didn't have to do the body thing. Because before you know it, it's going to be over. So find a way to really take advantage of the reason that you came here to do this physical thing.
Yeah. And with that, let's just go ahead and anchor all of this into the body. So go ahead, and if you like, close your eyes, unless you're listening to this driving, in which case do this later. But go ahead and close your eyes, and I invite you to place your hands on your body somewhere that feels supportive to you, maybe on your legs, or one hand on the belly and one hand on the heart, or wherever you like. And take a moment to simply take a couple of breaths and listen to whatever it is that your body wants to share with you right now in this moment. What message does your body have for you right now? And whatever you receive, go ahead and offer it a nod of gratitude. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. Offering so much gratitude to your body for speaking with you and sharing this message with you. And we're going to ask one more question here of asking your body, what would you like to do with this? What would you, or when, in whatever way you want to phrase that, asking your body, how do we want to play with this? How do we want to put this into action? And see what your body has to say. And whatever comes, once again, offering gratitude and acknowledgement to your body. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. And let's invite that all of this information, all of this cognitive process that we did throughout this podcast episode, let's go ahead and invite all of this to gently settle within the physical cells, within the body, anchoring into the wisdom that is already within you, and knowing that by intentionally cultivating and growing this awareness and these practices, you are paving the way to give yourself more freedom, more capacity, more strength, more resilience, more joy, more love, more pleasure, more life. And you get to be here in your body and enjoy it. So once again, deep breath in and let it go. And gently coming back to this moment that is now as we close out our episode today. Thank you. Thank you for doing that work with us. Thank you for showing up here to play with us and to engage with us in this podcast. It's, Kat and I really do have a lot of fun doing this, and we know that it is helpful for you. So thanks for letting us be a part of your process. And we're going to close with a note about how you can support us and support the podcast, and then just one or two things that you can keep an eye out for from us. Again, it does cost us to produce the podcast in terms of paying for upload fees and production and etc. And so if you would like to make a donation of any amount, that would be super helpful for us to continue to offer the podcast out for you for free. And if you would like to do that, you can use PayPal to send us a donation to Shaman Sister Sessions at gmail.com over PayPal. That would probably be the quickest and easiest way for you to do that. Or if you want to find us on Patreon, patreon.com/Shaman Sister Sessions, or find us Shaman Sister Sessions on Patreon, and then you can become a recurring donor that way. Even if it's $1 a month, that would be really helpful. So thank you. Thank you for your support. And again, it is with a lot of joy that we want to continue to offer this out into the world. And we're almost at 100 episodes, so please help us get there. And in terms of other things, I've got a new project series happening, which is related to our topic today. I'm doing a series of events called Embodied Wild that are spiritual practice out in nature. So let's get off the mat, off the meditation cushion, and go get out of our heads and into our bodies. So if you're in the Portland area and you'd like to join me for that, then you can go ahead and contact me. You can find those events up. And if you're on my list, you should get invites in your email to come do embodiment practice and come do work that way. So I hope to see you there. Kat, what do you have going on?
Right now, Open Your Channel should be starting any minute now. If you are watching this right when this is being released, then February 9th of 2020 will be the next round of Open Your Channel, being a led online group experience with recorded and live teachings, meditations, practices, and being able to practice channeling in a group. And then we'll have an amazing retreat in April with Michelle is going to come to New Mexico, and we've got an insanely epic retreat center that we're going to be working at. And so if you're interested in that, I would check it out right away. And it's on my website, katherinebird.com, and it's Open Your Channel. You can also just open your channel and Katherine Bird, or find me, and all of those things are easy to find. So yeah, that's the next thing that's happening for me. And from there onwards and upwards.
Onwards and upwards. All right. Well, we'll see you next time for the rewilding conversation that we're going to have here soon. And in the meantime, happy embodiment. Many blessings.